thanks for joining, everyone. I'm sure a few more people will trickle in here, but let's get going. My name is Umbrella. I am a designer on Duelyst, and I am here to talk about bosses with some cool other people here today. Want to introduce yourself, Kronikle?
I'm Kronikle, and I am the lead designer and developer for bosses and the AI.
That sounds really important. I think Kronikle is going to be our main man here on the bosses. And then we also have with us Thanatos, who you already know and love. Thanatos, want to introduce yourself?
No, not really. Everyone knows who I am, right? So
Right.
I'm the community manager for Duelyst. The I suppose lovable face that you get to hear from all the time. So let's get rolling.
I think the dog emote sums that up very perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so yeah, we are here because it is the anniversary of boss battles. Boss battles, for anyone somehow in here that doesn't know about boss battles, which is deeply confusing. But if you're here and you don't know what boss battles were a feature we added, I guess, a year ago, is how anniversaries work. That basically give players a way to fight against these cool bosses that mostly Kronikle and Deceptical made. And these bosses are, they're single player content. They all do some pretty wacky and zany things, and people have been loving them so far. So how do we want to kick this off? This whole time while we're here, if you guys have any questions, throw them in chat. We're going to be pulling questions from previous Reddit threads where we got some questions from you guys. We have some questions from the forums. We have some things we want to talk about. So I guess let's open with sort of what was the start of bosses? I guess we'll aim this at Kronikle. What was sort of the impetus of boss design, and what did some of the earlier bosses look like? Like, how did this all begin? Take us back.
So yeah, we started boss battles as kind of a way to test to see what single player content could look like beyond the daily challenges, and we had some pretty rough initial bosses. So fun fact, the initial bosses that we started designing had bloodbound spells. And the very first one we made was really a one-on-one against a computer, but hey, his bloodbound spell could summon a chimera for 1 mana, which wasn't the most fun to play against, because you'd just basically be stacking enough removal to get rid of the chimera every turn. But we've since then evolved. We've taken a lot of feedback from the community, and I'm pretty happy with the state that bosses are in right now.
Yeah, I think the chimera that wound up being live was more just like a chimera. You hit it and it spits out something, and you cross your fingers and hope it's not a Mechazor. But that's definitely a healthier version than some of what we tested internally. And I think Thanatos we were talking before we started, we were talking about some of the earlier bosses, and there's a magical boss that Thanatos remembers that I don't know that even I remember. So you want to tell us about Saboro?
Oh dear, yeah. So next, when I first started play testing bosses, Kronikle and Deceptical, I created 2 for us to test on the server, and one of them was the Chimera. The other one was Saboro. And the reason I remember this one distinctly was because it was the most, like, if you thought hitting a Chimera and hoping Mechazor didn't pop out was bad, Saboro was a whole nother level of RNG for me, because his ability was all of your minions gain random keywords at the start of his turn. So he would summon things like a Winged Mechazor, and then all of a sudden it has Provoke, and you're like, okay, well, that's really annoying, right? And the next turn it gets Force Field, and you're just like, what is this 2-drop doing entangling me? Like, let me go free. I want to kill the boss. But that wasn't even the biggest thing, right? Because he'd summon like these massive minions in behind him, and they would get ranged, and you're just like, there is no fun. It's just crossing your fingers and hoping this guy rolls really bad keywords. And then you're like, there's not really any bad keywords except airdrop. But I don't think that was in the pool of abilities he could get. So it's just like, what is this fight? And eventually we moved away from that design. And I was like, okay, great. This is nothing I ever have to like relive again. And I'm super happy. So
We had some other bosses in our early iterations that had Death Touch, which was basically Celestial Phantom ability. And we tried so many bosses to like, hey, what happens if we give the boss the ability to instantly kill anything that it attacks or counterattacks? And we just found like it was not fun in almost any scenario, that like anything you threw at it would just instantly die.
Yeah, I remember that was the Bone Reaper boss. And like what made that fight specifically worse was it was a Bone Reaper, so it had provoke. So not only could your general not move away from the boss, he was just constantly dealing 2 damage to everything around him. But if it hit, it killed it because it had Death Touch. You're just like, oh boy. So I'm gonna have to play airdrop minions to make sure he doesn't hit them. But that's not gonna be sufficient. So you're like, okay, I have to play an artifact spell heavy deck. Great.
Yeah, so I think a cool sort of segue from this, one thing that we learned from early bosses, and community feedback is probably the main thing driving all bosses, was sort of how to figure out the general feel of bosses, right? So with every boss, they bring something really unique to the table. They have some weird mechanic that's going to change up your deck or not. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that makes you think, what do I do against this boss? But one thing we had to kind of fall into was this more standard, and I think most bosses, you start with 3 mana, this sort of like different opening. Because I still remember in some early phases, this is a story that was great, where you read the boss and you go, okay, that boss does something really cool. And then you think about it, and both players start on like 4 or 5 mana, or maybe the boss a lot of times would start with more mana than you. But I still remember internally, and I don't remember what boss it was, but I remember on my turn, I read the boss, I went, got it, I have a game plan. I walked forward, I played my 2-drop, I passed turn, and then the opponent's turn, they just played Elix Stormblade. And I just looked at it, and I was just like, I don't know how to beat that. Like, it doesn't matter what cool thing this boss does, I've already lost.
That was, I think that was I don't know how to pronounce it, Calibro.
Yeah.
Calibro. That was
I think that's true. That was like an early iteration of Calibro, and
where we had to sit down and talk to the boss team. We're like, so look, there's no mana springs on the field, and they start with more mana. And I was just like, there's no way to compete with this boss, because like he has all these set openers that he can do, and all of them are like, I've got a 2/3, you know?
Yeah. It's like they play Elix turn 1, and you're like, I immediately struggling. So definitely finding that sort of sweet spot helped shape bosses where they are. So I'm trying to think.
A lot of bosses also have like kind of a ridiculous board state that you have to fight on top of them having that mana advantage with no mana springs for you. So yeah, that was definitely like a quality of life thing that I think made the bosses a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's that sweet spot between the bosses, absolutely. And I see so many comments going by in chat. So many bosses do completely unfair things, and sometimes you feel like you're going to have a good time, and then the boss just decides today is not your day. There are other times where the boss gives you a bunch of really sweet things, and you just shrug and I guess beat the boss and go, okay, thanks. Like, I think one thing I've seen a lot with the most recent boss, Andromeda, is just when they give you an obelisk, it's just so spicy. And I forget who said this, and I believe I saw this on Reddit and not the forums, but I loved the sort of, someone said like, this boss gave me obelisks, and that was incredible, and it was so fun that I went and built an obelisk deck and then came back to Andromeda and went, oh, that's not how that works. Because of course, playing the obelisk gives you something else, yeah. Oh yeah, that might be true. Yeah. So those are the kind of like wacky stories we have with some of these bosses. So I guess on that note, do we want to talk about maybe some of ours or the community's favorite bosses or least favorite bosses? Just sort of go over some of those.
I'll start. So as far as like favorite bosses that I've done, Legion I think is my favorite boss that I've made. So Legion was a boss that I wanted to make. First was put on the project of boss battles, but I ran into the issue where I wanted Legion clones to act as generals, so you couldn't just say just do like a decimate and kill like 3 out of 4 of them and finish them off. But the game does not act in predictable ways when you have 5 generals on the fields. So it took quite a while before I was able to come back with like kind of a new implementation of Legion. And yeah, so far Legion is my favorite thematically. But I also really enjoyed like making the Harmony boss battle, like the Harmony Dissonance. Think that like that kind of switch into the second phase is such a fun surprise that takes a lot of people back. And I also really liked what is it, Malik, the one where whenever you summon a minion, you draw a card, but they get an ooze.
Oh yeah.
I think that was one of the bosses that kind of experimented with the ability of like, okay, instead of just making just a straight up challenging boss fight, let's do a challenging boss fight, but also give the player tools that they can't get in a normal game. And from that, we kind of pushing for that with the latest bosses.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump in real quick. Going right off of that, my favorite bosses definitely have to be Arconis and Orias, because I don't remember which one's which right now. I think Arconis was the one you start off with 9 mana, which meant immediately like you step into the game because if you haven't read any of the guides, you haven't seen anything from the forums or Reddit, you go, it's just a regular boss fight, and then you're like, oh, I have 9 mana. Right? Like immediately. First thing I did was like, okay, concede this fight. I don't care. Go to deck building. Like, what's the thickest deck I can make? Right? I'm like, okay, let's put in every single big creature I can. And I'm a Magmar fan, so I'm like putting some fractal replications in there. Like, let's go big. And then kind of the similar issue with Orias, because Orias had that rush totem in the center that anyone can utilize. And I was just like, you know what card that everyone loves to talk about? Serpenti. It's like, now you can give Serpenti Rush. Like, who doesn't want to play with that? And now, of course, Orias had all these other big creatures too. So you're just like, do I keep the totem up so I can rush my units, or do I like risk the chance of him hitting me something equally big? And like that guy has Peacekeepers in his deck, and it's just like, you don't want to get hit by Peacekeepers. She's just like, where's find the balance, keep the totem up, but make sure you kill it before he gets to really utilize it. So like those were my two favorite experiences, I think, that we've had so far.
With Arias, I noticed like because I like watching like streams and videos of like how people take on the boss encounters, and a lot of people just were killing that. That
I sure did. It's too spooky for me.
Right? It's like, okay, there seems to be like
you design this like cool piece that reshapes how the game is played, and like half of everyone playing is like, no, I'm gonna hit it. I don't want that at all. Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really spooky. I was very afraid of that, so I definitely always cleared that first. But I don't know if that's fun or exciting.
I don't. There was some
if you were
really
to update that, I'd put the invulnerable keyword on it, so it's like,
oh,
hey,
no,
now you have to use it.
Spoilers from the future. All right. No, so going off of that too, there was really some interesting things starting to develop around that point of time when we started making bosses, that people started creating custom decks to beat bosses, and they were very standardized decks. So Kronikle, help me if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of our goals for creating bosses was to create a unique experience from ladder, right? We wanted players to go into the boss fight and go, my ladder deck isn't going to work here, and it shouldn't. I need to create a deck that can beat this boss. And we did start seeing that often in like the mid to late episodes of last year, where players were immediately going to like Blood-Tide Priestess, or they were going to Sarlacc, or they were going to Gromar, and they were just like, oh, these cards will win the boss by themselves, because the bosses have like some complications trying to tackle these cards, right? Without the proper removal, they couldn't do anything. And so I'm going to leave this up to you, Kronikle, and talk us through about how we had to go through some of these challenging issues and what we did to fix that.
Yeah, so I mean, we haven't found really a perfect solution necessarily for like grow decks, I guess would be a good example of how they're talked about as one of the answers to boss battles. A lot of boss battles can be beaten using grow decks, and it's a ton of like really elegant solutions to that. So you throw in a lot more removal, and so hey, when this grow minion gets really big, then you can use like one of your removal options. Lately, with the newest bosses, we've kind of been trying to make it so the boss abilities in a way kind of counter. So for example, like harmony, like the harmony boss fight, it actually gives you a colossus like right at the start of the match, and it's to your detriment if that colossus is really big when you enter the second phase. So that's kind of one of the things that we're with, just giving the boss abilities that can kind of counter these meta decks. And we're also going to be working on updated boss exclusive cards that should help to counter a lot of those sorts of decks.
Ooh, that sounds pretty exciting. Yeah, I think giving bosses sort of unique tools that allow them, that sort of leverages their intelligence against players, is probably a polite way to put it for the bosses. I don't want them to hear me and get mad, but that'll help compensate where essentially no matter how interesting or cool a boss fight is, the bosses are not as creative as you guys. That's where humans prevail over machines for now, is creativity. So we got to give them some extra tools to keep them nice and stocked against the players. And I think another important thing when we tackle these issues, when we tackle people who come into bosses with their deck, is we also understand that while we want to make it harder and we want players to experiment more with their deck rather than just bringing the same thing, we do know there are players out there that will say, I will beat every boss with Sarlacc. And while sometimes we're going to make you earn it, you're going to work for it. It's always possible. Those people have proved time and time again that they can do it, and that's honestly incredible.
I wonder which famous streamer we might be talking about.
It could be anyone.
It could be anyone, really.
I think another good thing to talk about in terms of when we make these bosses is just sort of accessibility, right? So I know usually when I beat the bosses internally before they ever come out, most of what I play is a Vanar deck that's almost all basics and commons. That's one of the main tools I try and run into the boss, and I know other people have similar experiences. So like how do we make sure internally that we're making bosses that give a wide variety of players a fun time?
The things that I do for testing is like I use starter decks for all the different factions and see how far like a starter deck can carry me through a fight, through like, yes, I know what the boss is going to do, what its mechanics are, how can a starter deck do? And if it does really well, then it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe this is right difficulty level, and I'll try it with like kind of another deck that will have uh like commons or rares, and if it still does well, then I'll pass it on to other people.
I think Lionar starter deck is a really important litmus test for our bosses. And while we don't necessarily always win, it's sort of like if you can understand how you could have won. If you see the light at the end of the tunnel while the boss like clobbers you to death, then we're headed in the right direction. And I think a lot of times that's true. And a lot of times, I think for most bosses, there's been a point where they're tuned that's just so tough or too easy. It's really tricky figuring out internally how to get these bosses in a healthy spot.
Yeah, difficulty was kind of all over the place at the beginning. Like we started off with Calibero as the first official boss, and that one was kind of a cakewalk because the artifacts that he could get, so he would equip like a random artifact each turn. He couldn't get any of the crazy artifacts. It was a really limited pool. And then we went into Monoliths Guardian, which was like a little bit harder. And Juggernaut and Shinkage Zendo, which like I think Shinkage Zendo is like standing up there as the most difficult boss that we've made. And when we were testing Zendo initially, it was I got an insanely lucky couple of plays, like in a with a Lionar starter deck, to where I was about 2 hit points away from killing him. Well, if this Lionar starter deck can get 2 health away from killing Shinkage Zendo, he's probably in a good spot. And I learned that was not the case.
Yeah, I think that's one really cool thing about feedback is as all of you know, pretty much everyone on the Duelyst team still plays a ton of Duelyst. We still love the game. That's why we're around still making it, and always excited to continue making it for you guys. And it's so interesting when we have this like wide array of players, right? And we'll make a boss, and then people who play like mostly meme decks will come back and say like, yeah, that boss was super easy. I just memed on him and I beat him. And then some of our like highest skill players will come back and they're like, I can't figure it out. He's literally unbeatable. So it's really interesting to see how, because bosses make you play something different, you might actually have a completely different experience regardless of how good, no matter how good you are at Duelyst, you might not be good at bosses, is I think what I'm trying to say.
I also like seeing that there's people who are specifically really good at bosses, and I remember seeing this way earlier in our development when we were still fine-tuning the AI, because they had discovered the kinks to the AI, right? Early on, one of the things the bosses couldn't handle very well was force fields or respawning units like Sarlacc and Gore. And I remember, oh yeah, so Borean Juggernaut, real big issue, right? And there was this cheese thing you can do where you could trap him in his own ice fortress. But then other people started noticing, like, so you know that really good card, Sunsteel Defender? He will sit there and bash on that all day long and never kill it. And that's one of the times, so we had to sit down and we're like, okay, so we need to do some improvements.
Yeah.
So we're like, hey, Kronikle, Deceptico, like, look, you know, this is real cool and everything, but I don't think the boss understands force field and like, you know, just like, I don't remember how long it took, but it took us a while to get that fixed. And same thing happened with Sarlacc, right? Where it would be like, oh, there's a random Sarlacc in this corner. Now the bosses try to play a little bit control oriented. They'll be like, it's a 1/1 minion. I can remove this off the board, and they would go and chase after this poor Sarlacc under the premise of like, I got to remove a minion, and it just spawns in a different place. And like, oh, now I got to kill it again and again. And they had this like no concept that Sarlacc is going to respawn. And so when people ask us like, oh, have you guys done any updates to the AI? I was like, yeah, we've done several updates to the AI. Now they're never going to be Skynet level. I don't think we're trying to aim for that at all. As Umbrella's already mentioned, right, one of the goals for this is to be accessible to all players to come in through. And if we make the AI a little too challenging, we ran this risk before, and I saw a lot of this feedback come specifically from ourselves. Where players are like, Cell is so annoying. He heals every time I play minions, and then I'm not encouraged to play minions, but he's gonna kill me anyways. And I don't feel like doing this boss fight, right? Like it's just not worth it. I don't feel like doing it. What's the point? So we do run this risk of making boss AI and the actual fight and the encounter with what's the contents in the deck being too challenging for players sometimes. And this goes for players of all skill level, right? Because there are people like we saw with Andromeda just last week where people are like, it's got Holy Immolation and Thunderhorn. I'm not playing against that. Like, I see that on ladder enough already. Like, no. I came to the boss to have a good time, and I'm honestly feeling so attacked right now that you put a Thunderhorn in the deck. Like, what's wrong with you guys?
So you're saying we won't ever make a boss that just plays 1 EMP a turn for the whole game? You don't think that would be fun?
I was honestly hoping Mega Serpenti would be that, because when I first saw Mega Serpenti on the list, I'm like, this just better be like 39 Serpentis. This is what the deck should be.
In a way, spiritually, Mega Serpenti does have the 39 Serpentis. It's not exactly.
I think it actually had about 7 Serpentis. Like it was kind of like a mana curve balance issue.
Wait, it had 7 Serpentis?
It kind of surpassed the deck limitations.
Wait, bosses can run. Bosses can run 7 copies of a card. Okay,
so Umbrella. And in case you don't remember this, we do have that Inquisitor. No, what was Inquisitor Kron? It was something like Paladin Kron. I don't remember what the name was.
Yeah, High Templar Kron.
High Templar Kron. It was High Templar Kron.
Paladin Kron.
And he's got like 8 Dominate Wills. And his his ability like reduces the mana cost by 3 or something. And it was just this time where like I wanted to play Lionheart because I felt like playing Lionheart then. And I went up and I'm like, I'm gonna play Iron Cliff in your face. He's like, it's mine. Like, I will back up and play a Duelyst. He's like, and that's mine. You're just like, okay, that's 2. Typically bosses only play 2 of a card, right? He just kept stealing everything. I'm just like, why? Why is this there? And I went to Kronikle. I'm like, is it a bug? Does he have more than 3? He's like, yeah, he's got like 8 of the deck.
That's amazing. I just meant Megapenti's ability is like every minion is a Serpenti, but I didn't realize they actually had that many Serpentis in their deck, which I guess brings up another interesting point: is how do we build the decks? Like when we have the vision for this boss, when they have an ability, when we kind of know what we want the experience to be, how do we go about building their deck? Like what does that look like?
Initially we just kind of want to make like a normal mana curve, and we try to deck with some cards that aren't as commonly seen. So we'll throw in some battle pets. We'll throw in cards from the last expansion that you basically never see on the ladder. But we also want to make sure that the boss has removal and card draw are the 2 main things. And then there's some streamers who kind of will get on my case when I put like a
Trinity Oath.
Trinity Oath, yes. And
I knew what you were gonna say by the way you said it.
Like, so Trinity Oath is, I guess, the elegant solution to giving card draw to bosses, but it is like the most direct way to do it.
Yeah,
and
it's one of the most simple value draws we have in so many ways.
The AI knows exactly how to play it. They wait till they're low on cards, and it's like, well, Trinity Oath time. And it's something that we're actually tackling with boss exclusive cards that we're going to be updating the old bosses with. Removal is another thing. Chromatic Cold is a card that's in boss decks, and it should be like thematically, but it's like the range dispel option that a lot of factions don't really have access to. So it's kind of put in there as a way to combat the Bloodtide Priestesses or the Grow minions, for example.
So the one of the things I look at when we're testing bosses is I like to look at the turn 1 plays, and I've gone over this quite a few times with Kronikle, where I'm just like, so realistically, this boss has 1 of 2 movements, and I tell him like, so like, for example, Wujin is one that like it gave me this biggest headache to try play testing, because I'm like, Wujin, you either take 7 damage on your first turn, or you take 4 and you lose a minion with 3 health. And he's like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, this is what you got to do, right? You can't leave the Beastbound Savage up. It's not a good idea to leave a threat with Frenzy Celerity up. So you have to run up to it and hit it. And they go, okay, so that's some damage. And then you know it's going to hit you back, so you're going to take an extra damage. And then Wujin himself, if there was a 3 health target, would fly over and kill it, and then create a clone and disappear off into a corner. Or if he couldn't kill the target, he would go up to you and hit you in the face. And I was just like, I'm starting the fight with like 15 health, right? And it's just like, Kronikle, I can't start this fight with 15 health. We got to balance this. Because he's just like, well, what's the issue with that? It's just like, well, then he's follow-up plays, right? Because what if he plays a big minion next? And just like, I'm at half health and you played a big minion. So that's something we also look at when we're creating bosses, is looking at what's their first turn play? What is the result of you doing? Because you're sometimes given this like false sense of security where you're just like, oh, I'm at 25 health and I've started at 3 mana and I can play this minion, and you're like, okay, but what is the boss gonna do next turn, and what is your actual starting situation? And that's something we've realized. It's just like you have to pay attention to what they can follow up with. Because like what we were saying earlier with Calibero, one of his first certain plays that he could have done was just open up with Elix, or he could have done was it double Silver Guard or Silver Guard into Windblade when it was still a 4/3, and then I think he played a slow as well. And you're just sitting here, you're just like, I'm locked up. Like, what is this world that I'm living in where I just played the game and I'm immediately at this massive disadvantage? So that goes into deck building, right? Because you look at it, you're like, okay, make sure that they aren't completely hopeless with what the god tier hand that the boss might draw. So that's definitely put into attention when we're testing these bosses.
Yeah, and making sure you have the right answers for bosses is pretty important. They're pretty ridiculous.
All right, so I do have a question to ask chat real quick, and this is something just because it's come up internally for us, and now we're curious to see. Does anyone know why bosses don't have bloodbound spells? Because they have OP health? Because they're not bloodborne? Duh.
So say, is it because of the lore? Hashtag because of the lore?
Does anyone read the lore?
Does anyone read the lore? Of course.
Because they would waste mana. Okay, so we actually did have one person get it right, and it's let's give a quick shout out to your boy Josh for being the first person to say it. So one of the old rules that was set in place by Eric Lang was, so bosses are not bloodbound generals, and therefore they cannot have bloodborne spells. And that actually influenced a lot of the early designs of our bosses, I feel. Kronikle, you want to go into that for a bit?
Yeah, so initially what we wanted to do for bosses was like have them set up as like these units that would have, or like these kind of like generals that you would face off against that would have like these really broken bloodbound spells, like the one I mentioned earlier, 1 mana summon a chimera. And we eventually started moving away from that to kind of, well, instead of letting them have this bloodbound ability, let's give them the benefits that they would have gotten from that, but like their normal everyday ability. So that's kind of what we ended up with. But why do you bring that up, Thanatos?
Yeah, interesting that you chose to bring that up, unless you have some ulterior motive.
Yeah, let's segue into this. So let's talk about some of the stuff we're going to be working on, hopefully in the next few months. One of the things we looked at was that, right, was we have all these bosses, they have really cool and unique effects, and as we continue to see the community create really clever decks and answers to issues that we had with the bosses, we just asked ourselves, it's like, okay, well, how many of our actual players like realize this and come to the logical conclusion that, oh yeah, they're not bloodbound generals, so they can't have bloodbound spells? And I asked Kronikle one day, I'm like, wouldn't it be a clean solution to introduce boss-specific bloodbound spells and just have them be boss-themed, right? So in that way, we can introduce a lot of the solutions we're hoping to include to bosses, right? Like card draw or removal or healing to a boss without having to clutter the deck with, everyone gets Trinity Oath and everyone's Schematic Cold, because we need that for the boss to operate, right?
Right.
So I think that's one of the things we're going to be working on in the upcoming months. Is there anything else that you want to bring up, Kronikle?
So yeah, so in addition to the boss bloodbound spells, we're also going to be making boss exclusive cards, cards that weird when a fire themed boss is casting chromatic colds to kill your blood-tide priestess. So we're kind of building both of these in conjunction with each other to try to combat kind of the awkwardness of not having the right answers, or boss decks having answers from factions that don't really fit the theme that they should be working with. And yeah, I think it's gonna make the boss experiences a lot more cohesive. Other things, do you want to go into? We're talking about the battlefields, like we're updating some of those.
Sure. So I read all the feedback that we get from boss battles. I go out and create the threads, and I remember quite clearly when we first released Archmag is Vol, people were just like, "Whoa, you get this guy Kane to help you," and you're just like, "Oh, it's an escort mission, right?" And he's this really cool, awesome guard, and you're just like, "Great, this is super cool because this is the thing you need to use to kill the boss." And then people were just like, that was really cool, but at the same time, I really hated having to babysit a battle pet, right? They're like, oh, it's awesome that you gave us something to start the boss fight, because it's just something you don't get to see in ladder play, right? You don't start with anything on your side of the field. And they were like, oh, we really enjoyed that aspect. We just kind of wish that we had a little bit more ownership of how the fight went out. So one of the things we're going to be trying to look forward to is when we come to boss battles, is as we start recycling some of the old bosses, is seeing if we can update the battlefield and include a little bit more spice to the field. It's just I want this to serve as two purposes. One, I want to make it, once again, the boss battles feel unique from what you see in ladder play, but also to give some hints towards newer players who may not know all the cards in the collection, right? They come in here, they have 800 cards in the collection. They're like, I don't know what to craft first, right? Or I don't know how I even should look at to try beating this boss. So, for example, like if we're going to fight Calibero, maybe you start with just a Rush Claw on your side. And you remember, oh yeah, this boss is an artifact boss. Tekken artifact removal, and you'll have an easier time.
Yeah. Also, so we've traditionally been shying away from mana tiles, and it's something that we want to consider on certain boss fights. Maybe putting them in the not so traditional spaces, but maybe scattered in kind of strategic locations that could give you an advantage if you were to take it over.
Or like a big block K of mana springs for Kronikle, right?
I mean,
that'd be pretty dank. It's like the theme of this boss is Kronikle is awesome.
So that was High Templar Kron, which I zoomed in so far into the thematic elements of it. It's this big badass who is just taking control of everything. So that's why, yes, he ended up with 8 dominate wills, because themes, they have to be preserved.
The theme is more important than if he steals all your stuff and you want to fall down a staircase.
So what I'm hearing is next time
he steals it, it's like, okay, well, he was supposed to. That's what this guy is meant to do.
Hashtag because of the lore.
So what I'm hearing is next time we see Kronikle, he's gonna, instead of having a throne of ice like some of the other bosses, he's gonna have a throne of mana tiles, and he's just gonna scatter, pick up everything, just kill you turn one. Is that how it's supposed to go?
Instead of celerity, a quadlarity,
quadlarity.
Move
new
4
keyword
times
coming to bosses.
4 turns, and then just he can get all the mana tiles.
I like to imagine the AI just grabs all the mana tiles and then doesn't have anything to do. But it's you didn't get their mana tiles.
I did this just to spite you. Just you, player. I don't want to have any fun here. All right. So we're getting close to our finishing hour of the dev talk. I do want to open the floor to the player questions. So we've gotten some really good questions on both the forums and the Reddit. So please talk about boss battle questions here, and we're going to go over some of the Reddit and forum questions while you guys fill up the chat for us to go over. Let's tackle some of the forum ones first, if you don't mind, Umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Let me pull that up, or I have that up, but tab over to it. Just any that I mean, there's really important ones like Mega Penti merch when, which just in general more merch when. I still want more Duelyst merch.
Like I said, well, we're gonna have to keep it to boss battle related because that's what the devs we have on hand is. So hard to answer merch questions when we don't have anyone from marketing immediately to tell us Yes or no?
That's pretty true. I think we kind of already, there's some questions in general in the abstract that were about, like, will the boss AI get better and like what happens when it does. I think we kind of talked about that in some way, right? I mean, there are more limitations that we could probably touch on a little bit, but when we see players doing something that, like, we know the AI isn't going to figure out itself, we learn them. We learn them real good. And then they know not to beat their head against force fields or chase Sarlaccs all over the board.
So I can kind of go into that a little bit more. So the original AI that was developed was literally only made to play the starter decks for every faction. If you were to give it a card that was common or rare, like you would not know what to do with it. So pretty much every card in the starter decks were just hard coded. And when we started battles, we wanted to improve the AI to basically be able to handle like a wide variety of cards. And we had two different use cases, like cards that have healing, cards that have damage, cards that have teleports, like all these different scenarios where when like new expansions would come out, we can just kind of plug in does like 5 damage to a minion and then like does this other stuff, and then the boss or the AI would know exactly what it does. So we've since built up the AI to handle this wide array, like variety of cards. And like you were saying, Umbrella, we've had to go back in and make improvements to the AI when we see things like force fields. The AI would just continuously move up to a force field minion and just attack it, and just wondering like, hey, why isn't this thing dying? So things that are just obviously like kind of broken, like they're explicitly exploiting the AI. Those are the things that we're trying to patch. But for plans to like do a complete like AI overhaul, we initially had work on an expert AI that was supposed to kind of calculate board state, and given the cards in your hand, the expert AI could calculate, okay, if I were to play this card in this location versus this card in that location, it could go through all the different calculations and determine, okay, here's the best board states at the very end. And it was something that's very difficult to get working on like a practical level. A lot of the issues were basically with performance, like the turns that the bosses would take upwards of like a full minutes.
Yeah, I remember some of that because I've got a lot of stuff to do. So when I'm playing any game and I play versus the AI and they really sit there and think about their turn, I just wave my fist angrily at the screen and say, "You're a robot. Think faster."
Right? Yeah. So we kind of scrapped that, and we just have been kind of making incremental improvements to the AI that we currently have that thinks fast and may not always do the best, but it tries and do.
I see another question that is both on the forums and has come up in chat a little bit. It's like a lot of questions that kind of blend together, which is something along the lines of, when do I get cooperative boss battles against giant bosses where I can slash off their tail? And to that I say, new Monster Hunter coming out in like 3 days. I'm pretty excited for that. Does that answer the question? we can all play Monster Hunter together. Well, so there are a lot of things that we want to do, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, where we know this is going to be a couple of questions we're going to get, which is sort of what's next for boss fights. So I think what we'll say first is sort of where they're at now, which is a lot of what we have with bosses. When we started with bosses, this loops into everything we've said and what Kronikle is just saying. We sort of came up with a game plan for bosses, and then we built on that, but really haven't changed the core framework. And we do have new things coming in the form of like bloodbound spells or alternate battlefields, and we are like revamping the bosses in that way. But as far as like big different features for bosses, there are a lot of things we want to do, and that will be awesome, but they kind of come nested with other tech. So for example, I know as far as alternate game modes go, some sort of like cooperative game mode, which is both like really exciting and like completely weird and super different, are things that we have, like we've talked about them and seen what we can do, and they have their own unique challenges. And it's one of those things, I think you saw this sort of over the holidays, which was when we had the Frostfire Festival, we came up with this really cool mechanic and we put it on a boss, and then realized that when we put a lot of work into a mechanic, we actually created like a sweet new game mode. We actually created the Frostfire Festival. So a lot of times what we're doing with bosses are going to be based on what we're doing somewhere else. And I know that sort of feeds into like, what about cooperative? What about things like that? As far as the comment on like larger minions or like two by two spaces or 3x3 spaces, just because I can speak to this because it's something that comes up in design. That is a whole big feature. That's like if we ever wanted to do something like 2x2 minions or just different sized minions, that's like a whole thing. So if we were to do bosses in that vein, it would have to also come out beforehand. It's not. I have definitely poked engineering, and I'm like, all right, can we just make a minion 2x2? And they're like, you're literally crazy. You're a crazy person. I'm like, right, but my job is to be a crazy person. So I'm just need to ask these questions.
Yeah. So let Kronikle and I jump a little bit on the engineering side. So there are a lot of things that you can consider engine limitations when it comes like that, right? So it's something that you could say is as simple as like, oh, just make a co-op boss where you use the same, ladder experience and you queue up with somebody and then you get to fight a boss. And one thing you have to consider is like right now the game, if you're going to it, only has two sides, right? Like there's you and there's not you. So for us to go and be like,
whoa,
yeah, really, it comes down to that, right? So you're like, so what if there's a boss? Well, then it's like, okay, so you either have to be able to harm your friend, but then we'd have to swap the boss every single fight, which is really awkward and not kind of like intuitive. And so it becomes this new like it's engine development. We have to spend time going and doing things that aren't necessarily easy to do at all, right? You have to sit down and like rebuild the game from the ground up. And I kind of want to bounce this off to what 2v2 mode is, right? When people are like, I want 2v2 mode. And trust me, like I've wanted 2v2 mode for about, I don't know, a year and a half now. When I first started playing the game, I was like, it would be great. And it's really easy to spell these things off, right?
Yeah, it's really easy to say what's a 2v2 mode like versus actually like implementing it. Is
you can go through and you can sit here and you're like, okay, so now I need to make sure that we're wired up 4 players, that the game can handle 4 different decks, that turn phases go fine, that if someone dies, this is handled correctly. And there's like, I mean, I hate to say this, but like, bugs happen in development, right? Where we have to catch this and go fix it. And you just sit there and you go like, well, now TV2 mode, like if we have issues, like sometimes it happens, right? Where a bug flies through our production pipeline. Imagine going through TV2 mode and being like, whoa, like this just exasperates whatever problems you could have. And it is engine level work, right? And now we have to ask the engineers like, hey, that really cool expansion you're working on? Do you mind just like not doing that so you can do this other game mode? And we're really sure that some of our engineers would just love to be like, oh man, I've been wanting to work on this forever. But we do have to focus on other priorities, right? So boss modes are great and we love working on them, but it isn't like the main focus of Duelyst. We do love our competitive scene. We do love the rank ladder that we have. We do love the idea of players fighting each other. And that is something that we have to give priority to then when it comes to something like 2v2 mode, where like it's a dream goal. We want to work on that. There's no point in anyone saying, no, that's a stupid idea. It's something we would love to do. It's just not where we should be allocating our resources right now. So let's go on to another question.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring up the boss skin one, because this is something that people have been asking for a really, really long time, right? So boss skins 1. Why don't you just throw them into the boss crates? Why don't you just let us play 6 different factions and unlock boss skins? So Yeah, Kronikle. Why don't we just do that? Just tell me why we just
yeah,
just make
Kronikle.
it happen.
Kronikle, why don't we have that? Come on, why? Tell us.
Why are you throwing this at me?
No, I'm kidding. He can't answer that. So this is a really complicated question because this doesn't come directly from the boss team. One thing you have to recognize is that working with Counterplay Games and Bandai Namco is that there are several different departments, and this isn't just like one guy goes and says, let's do this. No. So Boskins, what happens? We have to go through marketing, make sure that's fine. Got to make sure production that we can actually do this task correctly. We got to go through engineering to say, hey, engineering, these skins that, yes, they are technically already loaded into the game. How do players obtain them? And then you got to go through the design team and make sure that the UI is something that's user-friendly, because you can't just say, well, if you open up your console command, your dev tools, and you type in this code, then it will deduct your diamonds. But if you don't have diamonds, then you're screwed and the game's locked out forever and you can't play Duelyst Spy, right? Like, no, we have to build and develop this type of stuff. And this isn't just like a one person or a one department team. We're constantly talking about trying to figure out the best way to implement boss skins, and it is something we still want to do. It's just what's appropriate and how do we get this out to players in a fair manner. So this group of people right here, Kronikle, Umbrella, myself, we can't give answers.
Yeah, but, that's a fine line to walk with our like relatively small team, is that a lot of times, because we're a small team, people are like, well, who does what? And we're like, oh, well, everyone does lots of things. But then on the other hand, sometimes people say like, well, why don't we have this? And it's like, I don't know. I don't do that. Like I do a lot of different things, but I don't do everything. I'm glad. I'm always moved that the community thinks every single person on the team is capable of doing every single thing on the team. But I just frankly don't think that's true. I think you think too much of us. You can pretty much never blame Unseven for anything. Unseven pretty much only does phenomenal stuff. I think it's always better to blame anyone else.
Unseven can't be blamed for anything.
Yeah.
Like, the only time you can blame Unseven for something is if you saw some really kick-ass pieces of art and you go like, that's a kick-ass piece of art. Then you're like, you gotta blame Unseven for that. You gotta go up to his Twitter and be like, that was a kick-ass piece of art. How could you? And then
I say that to him all the time. I always tell him like the art's too cool, but that's neither here nor there.
But so yeah, back on the topic of, so what about more rewards? And people, that's something I see a lot of times, is people going like, why don't you just throw more rewards at it? And it's a very complicated question, because so as a player, why don't you just give me more free stuff, right? Like let's talk about that at a high level. Why don't you just give me the whole collection when I start the game? And that is something that unfortunately we do have to gate for players, and that's why like even something as like, oh, let's go ahead and make a reward for being the boss with all 6 factions. It's not that simple for us. It's simple to say, but once again, it has to go through all these departments and make sure, hey, is this a positive user experience? Well, for the users, they're all going to say, yeah, more free stuff is great. Why wouldn't you do this? But then you have to take into consideration other factors, such as like, okay, well, how fast are players developing their collections? Is this actually something that you're going to notice? Because so here's something that we've noticed a lot, right? Is players going, well, I don't feel like doing a boss because it's just an orb. What is an orb to me, right? And then when we look at it from the other point of view, we're like, well, technically this is a once a week quest that gives you 100 gold. And you compare that to your daily quests, and this is the best quest you can get. But players don't see that, right? They're like, it's just an orb, right? Like, I don't care about an orb. Ugh, like, come on, give me something bigger. I want a boss skin. And you're just like, all right, well, how do we go through this? And then it's a lot of back and forth between plenty of individuals. Are Brome's pigtails intentional, or is that eventually going to be...
I can't believe you're reading that question.
I have to.
I can't believe you read that question.
So
we all saw it. We all saw it.
I think those are an illusion of the mind. They're not really pigtails. They just come off as pigtails. If you look at his glorious splash art, he does not actually have pigtails.
And if they were pigtails, absolutely a boss fight would be the only way to chop them off, because Brome is just so killer.
Oh man. Let's see. Do we have any other excellent boss questions?
Puzzles really quickly, because puzzles are different. And we talked more about why we stopped doing puzzles when we did, like why we put puzzles on hold. But a lot of it is interconnected, in that a lot of the time we had to make bosses came from the developers that were bringing you puzzles. So I don't. Puzzles are another one of those things. There are so many things that we either haven't done yet that we want to do, or that we've done that we want to do more of, that we're always 1 or 2 people projects, and it will be incredible if we get to go back to them. But at the time, we are all doing some other stuff. I mean, I know, yeah, we're all pretty busy.
Yeah, so if it's any consolation, so those, like we said, those developers who were working on puzzles are the same ones who moved on to bosses, and it was something that we had to consider. We're creating 7 new puzzles. We're not 7 new puzzles a week, right? And so it's like 28 to 31 puzzles a month, and that's a lot of time for someone that for really the community who's going to sit there and in 5 minutes go, okay, I'm done, and I'm waiting for the next one. And okay, I'm done. And really, the issue that we came across with puzzles was the amount of effort it took these guys to create a puzzle was not being seen in the amount of time it took to complete them. So we came to consensus, right? Like, well, bosses seem to be more intriguing. They definitely get more replay value. People have to go through and sit through and really digest what they're playing with. Sometimes the bosses are really easy. Sometimes the bosses are really challenging. But at the end, they should give a more fulfilling experience, right? And one of the things we had to do was like, okay, you got 5 gold out of doing this puzzle, right? And some people were like, I'm really offended you took that away from us. I was like, okay, but that 5 gold converted into an orb. Like, once again, it was just this like perception issue. It's like, we understand bosses or that puzzles were really cool, but like now we're giving you bosses which should be more entertaining. They give you a better reward than this. And I see Poisony asking this question over and over again, so let me address it. Can we add puzzles back into the bosses? That's something we can actually look into, right?
So, aren't bosses puzzles?
They are, but he's not thinking like the turn 1, right? So that's a possibility.
We should just make a boss that if you don't beat on the first turn, they kill you. That sounds like what you want, right? That's the solution. You're just
give them back fire orb.
I have 3 mana. I have a Serpenti and a Windjammer, and somehow I'm supposed to deal 40. Seems legit.
So that would be something we could actually look into, since we've mentioned like, hey, let's tinker with the board a bit and make the starting plays more interesting. Maybe we can add a little bit of the puzzles, back into bosses and be like, okay, well now you start with your Chimera in the start of the field, and it's dispelled, and you have to go kill all these things and do your best from there, right? And then the boss is gonna get, okay, well, since I'm High Templar Chronicle and I have my start of mana, and what was it, Quadlarity, the most secret of all keywords. I'm just going to kill you because you didn't kill me turn 1. And
if we ever make something with Quadlarity, just to be perfectly clear, it's also going to have Quad Blast. That's just implied.
All the lasers. Okay, so what he's saying is stun is going up in value for boss battles, and buy now.
And I think, this sort of everything we've been talking about loops back into something we have also seen a lot, which is like, man, wouldn't it be sweet if Duelyst had either all of these bosses in a way that was integrated with the lore, or like a single player mode, or like a huge PvE content update. And yeah, we absolutely internally talk about that all the time. I mean, a lot of us are here because we love card games, but a lot of us are here because we love games like Fire Emblem, or like Final Fantasy Tactics, or Ogre Battle, or the list goes on and on. So that would definitely be something that would be phenomenal, but that's absolutely essentially a whole extra game, right? I would love to just sit down and also make a single player like tactical RPG in my non-existent spare time. I mean, like if someone right now was like, all right, let's do that, then let's do it. But it's the same as making an entire different game. I think the real time save there would be using this fantastic art again, and even then we would need something to make it special, something that really makes it stand out. If we just did the exact same thing, it would feel a little rehashed, and we'd have to add a little ribbon to it. But yeah, it would be the same as making a whole extra game. And for the most part, we are working on Duelysts, so that's where my time goes, at least. I don't know if anyone in chat has heard of Duelyst. Very unclear, but
check it out.
It's a pretty cool game. You can. What is a to-do list? That's your boy Josh. What is a to-do list? That's my mom's favorite joke. Just so you know. That is because I work on Duelyst. That is my mom's favorite joke.
Oh man. Right. Any other big questions that we haven't covered yet? Trying to go through them real quick.
I think we hit most of them, either directly or indirectly. Like there are a lot of questions I see that I don't know if we talked about directly. Like I see the question from Reddit about players trying to cheat the boss, but we did talk about like giving players room for creativity and responding whenever people approach a boss in a way we don't think is good. We adjust the AI, but most of the time we love when people find like clever solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's solutions we find ourselves and we love and we let them in. Honestly, a lot of times someone's like, turns out against this boss, if you just play like a tusk boar and run it up and to the left, the boss gets confused and catches on fire. And it's like, that's amazing. How did you figure that out? I love it.
I think my favorite slip through is Eclipse. Because there'll be time. What's up? Go ahead and field it, Kronikle.
See the question from the Sarlacc army master Suku. So I actually made changes to the AI initially specifically to deal with the Sarlacc army streams that I would watch, where initially the AI would move towards these 1/1 minions, and they would use like Phoenix Fires on it. They would use all of their removal because it's like, hey, it's an easy thing to remove. And the one of the solutions that we went with was like, okay, let's make it so the AI kind of just ignores Sarlaccs, but then it's like, okay, well now you can kind of wall the AI behind Sarlaccs, and because they're ignoring the Sarlaccs, they're just gonna be trapped there. So Sarlaccs are they're a tough problem to tackle. So I've been Andromeda boss battle, working towards ways where, hey, you can't summon Sarlacc. What are you gonna do now? But
Oh,
he was
no.
still managed to beat the boss with the Sarlacc deck list anyway.
They're bosses that
like,
we look at and we go, I don't know how you would play Sarlacc against this boss. You get punished so hard, and yet it happens, and yet you do it. It's like it's one of those things where, can we even stop you? Like if we made a boss and its only ability was you can't play Sarlacc, would you do it anyways? Like I think you would. I think you'd find a way.
Like
we had a boss that actually gave you Sarlacc, didn't you?
What was that?
Was it Zell that gave you Sarlaccs? And like
the one that punished you for having like minions on the board. Yeah, that was one of the kind of like how you're playing Sarlacc for every boss. Like try this one out for size. And like Harmony was another one that like still like it was still beaten with Sarlaccs, which is like it says more about skill, I guess, at that point. If someone can consistently beat bosses with against bosses that are designed to counter that, which is really cool. But we'll have to find out better ways to deal with that. Minions that cost 3 mana that have less than 2/2 stats cannot be summoned.
Oh no. Please don't do that.
So throw a bone in the Bloodtide Priestess strategies.
It should just say like, if you play Sarlacc against this boss, they disenchant your collection. I think that's how we handle it. It's one of those things where Hasuku just like comes to Reddit like limping on one leg, bleeding from the head, saying, "I did it. I beat the boss with Sarlacc," and we're like, "Oh no, what have we done?"
All right. Well, we have hit our hour mark, unfortunately. As much as these guys would love to go on about bosses, and I would too, we're going to have to call it here. I do want to thank everyone for coming out. We will have a post blog write-up about this. I'll try to cover some of the other questions we didn't get to, try to explain and expand on some of the other topics as well. And I do want to mention that, yes, guys, this is a new year. We're starting Dev Talks again. This isn't going to be only one. We'll have another one for next month. Umbrella's going to be here again. I'm going to try.
I'm always here. You can't get rid of me. Woohoo!
So for next one, we're going to be kicking out Umbrella, making sure you can't come in. You'll be muted.
Hey,
and,
you can have a dev talk specifically about how Umbrella makes the game worse, and I'll show up. Actually, I have the most insights on that. But I'll be here, and nothing you can do will stop me unless I'm not available.
Yeah. So, well, next Dev Talk, we'll have a different topic, obviously. If you guys want to voice your opinions and tell us what kind of topics you're looking forward to, I'll definitely try telling it for that and see which kind of developers and publishers I can get on here to help talk on that subject. And outside of that, thanks for stopping by, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for dropping by, everyone. We're so happy those of you who've been here the whole time dropped by a little bit. This will be available as a recording for anyone who missed it. I don't know how that's helpful to say here. Also, if you're listening to the recording, what's up? But yeah, give us any feedback you have, any questions we didn't answer that you want answered, any questions in general that might point towards another dev talk, any feedback about this format. We definitely tried something a little bit new. It's a spooky room filled with cool people. So yeah, anything at all. I'm sure that like Danny will have the perfect format. Thanatos will have the perfect way for you to get your feedback. And yeah, it's been great.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for joining us.
You guys take care. Later.
Later. Oh God, now what do we do? Do we just leave?
Maybe we can like just kind of breathe weirdly into the microphones until people just get creeped out and leave.
It's an unsolved problem of this format. It's
post dev talk, chill. Just,
normally it's like the stream would end and we're all just here and then we talk. But now it's like, well, we're still here with everyone, but it's over. It's officially over. After Hours Lounge.
Have everyone pour some shot of whiskey and just kind of relax with us.
We'll talk through this. Oh my!
Such chaos.
You know what we didn't go over, and I guess we'll have to cover. I'll cover this in the blog.
Is this a live post-mortem?
This is a live post-mortem. We didn't get to go over any of the upcoming bosses or give out any spoilers.
Oh, you're right. We didn't. Which, whenever we fail to give out spoilers, that means Emil is happy and Keith is disappointed. That's how that works. Bringing it back.
In the Duke of Discoverable.
Yep, bringing it back.
The old play Duelyst Twitch emote.
Yeah.
So someone's asking what's the next boss on this. I do have the pleasure of saying that we will have Shinkage Zendo coming up soon. It was requested by a few people, so it's just like he's coming back. We're making our full rotation.
Are those people who requested it also Satan?
No, they love a good challenge, and I look at them weirdly, but I'm willing to give it to them. So we'll have Rin the Shadow Sworn is coming up next this week. So have fun fighting the giant grow swarms.
Oh yeah, I was gonna touch on like Rin the Shadowsworn, and there's a few other bosses where it's kind of cool because they just came from like internal conversations about bosses. Like like trivia bit, Rin the Shadowsworn's idea was spawned from just a really sweet Rift deck that Robot Rocker had, and he was like, that was such a memorable experience, and it just like became a boss.
The funny thing about that one is that a lot of people played against it and were wondering why the AI would keep summoning these 1/1 Wraithlings that would eventually just keep growing, but all of the growing Wraithlings would always hide in the back. And that's a little AI quirk with how it handles grow minions, where it just kind of waits till I think it's like a 4/4. Like if it has grow,
it's a 5/5. It has to wait until it's a 5/5, then it goes out. Yeah, because I remember this because I sat there and watched so many streams where people were like, "Oh, the AI is really stupid." I'm like, "It's not stupid. It's just you got to remember that the original grow minions were like a 3/4 and like the 3/3, and like they wait like 2 turns and then go out. Now these are starting from 1/1, and it's just
right.
like."
Yeah, it was kind of a thing where like we didn't want to completely re-change like how the AI deals with its own grow minions, so we kind of just like, all right, well, it's gonna have kind of quirky behavior, but like, hey, these wraithlings are gonna get scary in a little bit.
Yeah. I like to think it's just it's the same as like when you're going out, right? Like you get ready, you're like, oh, I need to put on my necklace, I need to put my watch on, I need to get my jacket, I got to get my wallet. It's like you're not ready until you're a 5/5 either. So it really just makes sense.
That's the best way to put it.
Now everyone's just gonna think of 5/5 wraithlings as like wraithlings with watches and jackets and wallets and stuff.
Tons of swag,
Responsible adult wraithlings.
Oh boy. So I mean, but there are I don't know. So I guess we'll throw this spoiler out too. So there are some bosses where looking at fine tuning their abilities and giving some upgrades. Upgrades to the population, but for us, it's going to be like nightmares we visited during testing. Things we, at least for me, there were just certain things that I remember seeing things. I'm just like, this is too strong to go out to the public. And that was like my like, I'm being conservative about the new players, right? And
that was back. Yeah, that was back when we cared about your safety.
Yeah, it was just
times have changed.
Like I was like thinking, I'm like, if I'm a new player and I come across this, I'm gonna be completely overwhelmed. And sure enough, the boss goes live, and everyone's just like, "This boss was a joke. Thanks for the free orb. See you next week." And I was just like, oh, "How could you?" So now I'm just like, "Oh, if that's the deal, hold on. Like we're gonna spice up some of the bosses to the original nightmare status. Let's give you guys a whirl." But
one of the bosses that we have, I think it's after Rin. If you guys liked Pacific Rim, like the kaiju battles, we have one that is completely thematically in that elements where you pilot a mech and you're battling against these invaders.
I think you had everyone at Pacific Rim. I think as soon as you said that, everyone just like sat forward in their seat.
Yeah, that one was like a really interesting one because it's introducing a mechanic that we've never done before. Like where, hey, instead of your general, you're piloting a mech.
That's incredible.
I'll leave it at that. I'll let people.
So much already.
If it's half as great as Pacific Rim or the Yu-Gi-Oh set where you also battle with kaijus, it's going to be phenomenal. Best Yu-Gi-Oh set ever. There's like two people in chat that know what I'm talking about.
They're like, I've not gotten to play around that Yu-Gi-Oh set, so I'm just.
It's good. Okay. It's exactly.
So I do,
yeah.
I was gonna say real quick. I do have the blessings of our wonderful art lead to give people a quick teaser, and you guys know that I love my teasers. This is probably my favorite part of the job is teasing the community with art, because it's like the best thing ever, and then I get to share it with everyone else. So let me pull that up real quick when I find it. Anyways, you guys can have your own conversation while I find this thing.
Say it again.
I don't know that we can talk about anything more exciting than this teaser. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about. Okay, let's quickly go off topic real quick. So one thing I want to confirm, because I don't know how people are getting this idea, is that the next expansion is not coming out next month. I'm sorry for those who are really excited for that, but it's way too close to when we just finished releasing Immortal Vanguard, and we need. we don't magically produce expansions out the wazoo like that. So and I do want to mention this because I've been seeing a lot of forum threads going like, so set rotations are coming up next, right? Like literally at the end of this month, everything's gonna change, and the devs haven't said anything. It's just like, once again, guys, like this isn't actually happening the next month. Like,
well, it looks like all of our like educated elite members are saying like obviously they're expecting March, so it's a good message to send out, but.
So just a reminder, guys, like we have a whole spoiler season to look forward to as well. So
wait, was I supposed to be making expansions this whole time? That is
no, you're supposed to be making like memes, I think is what we're expecting out of you.
secret
All right.
memes, like in a giant vault of memes. I guess I'll start.
You say
I guess
secret,
I'll start.
but like everyone knows it's going to be Serpenti related.
That's just because it's the best meme. I can't control that.
Two, it's like, why would you kind of veer away from the Serpenti memes? They're
Yeah.
like they're tried and true. They work.
All right. All right.
No, no. If we were Serpentis hired by CPG, we'd be working 7-4 and Frenzy, of course.
It's going up in
It
depth.
was such a stupid joke, but I love it.
Da-da-da.
Ooh, interesting. So I thought I didn't know what to expect from the teaser, but this is actually a teaser from the upcoming expansion, not a boss.
Click on
No,
that,
yeah,
you
not
can
a boss.
actually see the
That's-
animation.
That's pretty
Has an
wild.
autoplay for you? I just hover over and it autoplays for me.
You
Yeah,
probably have advanced settings
can-
for people who are
Oh.
competent.
I see it now.
I'm excited that we're teasing this. Not that this is the point of the dev talk, but this is one of my favorite minions, like visually, from this upcoming expansion. I like it a lot.
Really? We haven't even gotten to some of the ones that I've got a list of teasers, and this isn't even one of my favorite ones. At
Oh
all,
no,
so
this is for me. This one's for
this really. Do you like ARMS? Is that it? Were you hooked on that new game?
arms. Oh, the game arms. I thought you meant like
The Switch,
abstractly the concept of arms, and I was like,
Do you like having
yes,
arms?
but I don't
Isn't
know
that
how you
neat?
pegged me as that kind of person. I think
You
I was
do things
actually
with arms.
I was talking to another one of the artists lately, and one of my feedback was I like how many hands there are, which is like maybe weird, but they're just a lot of really good hands. It's unimportant. I am checking.
No, when I do teasers, I like to tease my community with upcoming expansion stuff. That's like the best thing ever, because then people start theorizing, like, what does it do? What does it do? And
Ooh, can I guess? Can I guess what it does, or is that like rigged?
I don't know. It depends what your answer is. If it's anything less than create Serpenti, I think that might not be available.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty fair. I know too much. This is, I believe, this was who did this? Glauber obviously did the concept, and I think
I can find.
I think Andrew was the animator. I might be whiffing on his handle or how he's presented publicly, but I thought it was Andrew. Andrew Badeau. Badeau. Does that seem right? Dark Fowls. Is that his handle? Dark Fowls. We have so many cool animators. I think it's Dark Fowls. Yeah. Serpenti visual update. Why would we?
Andrew Badeau, Dark Fowls. Yeah, that's the correct person.
I spent a lot of time looking at the art, so I think I'm usually pretty spot on who.
And if anyone ever has any questions, when we post this on Twitter, if you don't use it, please go ahead and join it. We get a lot of news from there. When we post our art on Twitter, Glauber does an excellent job of immediately retweeting it with the appropriate artist. So if you guys have any questions, you can always reach the art team through Twitter. They're more than happy to talk about, their passion, because it is a passion. These guys go out of their way to make these beautiful pixel arts, and it's just like jaw drop inspiration.
Was my mind is like on 7, like all of the original sprites that we use for the expansions and stuff, and at the same time that he puts out these super high quality pixel art units, he also has time to make like all the pixel art for Full Metal Furies, and it's just like crazy how talented Glauber is.
Yeah, it is like one of the tasks I sort of willingly and very happily took on in design is like coordinating the design with the art, which is, I guess that could be a whole discussion for like a different talk, but that was something where I love the art so much and I really wanted to be involved. And I will say, like, talking to Glauber, giving him feedback on the art, sort of like helping him again. It's like all his creative genius, but just sort of like working with him on that has just been phenomenal. He's so great. It's just the end of this dev talk is actually like secret footnote. We all love Devin a lot, and he knows this is all. He knows we love him. So
He's also very good at, like we said, dispersing the love to the appropriate people. Like he like we directed a lot of it at him, and then he goes like, it's not on me, guys, it's the team, and these are the.
I still remember this is I'm gonna do this as sort of like we're kicking off dev talks again, but this came up in an earlier dev talk, in the art dev talk, where I was saying I remember when I was just a player before I worked for CPG way back in alpha, and I was really involved with the community, and I was on podcasts and involved in the forums, and really just loved this game and put myself out there. I remember playing him on ladder, and I just like friended him and said like, oh my goodness, I love your art so much. I'm so like moved to have played you. Like I'm so moved by this moment. And he was like, oh, that's cool. It's really awesome talking to like one of the players that is most passionate about the game, that's like part of the community and is always super active and clearly loves Duelyst. I'm like, what? I'm not important. What is he talking about? And I think I said that during the art dev talk too. So I'm saying, yeah, Un7 is the concept art, like the pixel concept artist of Duelyst.
Yeah,
Pretty wild.
Un7 makes the original like concepts. Like he makes the original still frame pixel art version of the units, and then we have a team of super talented animators who animate all of those designs that Un7 makes and makes them into like really cool, fluid, smooth animations for attacking, dying, moving, and stuff. But Un7 has his hand on all of the original concepts first.
Oh yeah, and it's I will say credit where credit is due. The animators absolutely bring things to life. There are some
They're
like
smooth.
Globber does such a fantastic job, but there are minions that I have seen that Globber makes where he's like Un7 he's happy with like the vision, but he's like, I don't know if this is 100% there. It's got a ton of style. It's really cool, but I don't know if this is it. I don't know if this is really it. And then he hands it to an animator, and the animator puts so much personality in what's going on that Globber's like, I don't even know how you saw that in my concept. That's so amazing. So it's phenomenal. Cool. I like art. Yep. This has been a nice like 15-minute Globber is amazing tangent.
Yeah, the post-mortem. Everyone loves Duelyst art on the Duelyst dev team.
Hey, in my defense of the last this is the 6th dev talk, of 6 of them, I feel like in 4 of them I've talked about how much I love the art. One of them was about art, but all the other ones were just me rambling. So, oops. Have we rambled enough? Do you think this is a?
I mean, you guys we're all free to go whenever we want to. Everyone's kind of chilling with us because we're still here. So,
yeah. It's just like it was done, and I just having fun. I don't know.
Still here woo! Look at that.
Yeah, so there was an artist I saw on Reddit that I kind of commissioned to see if they can make a Inquisitor Kron like a D&D type sketch.
Oh, that's so sick.
I love what he did with that. And then someone went in and actually colored it. It was the colored version of it. It's sending. There it is. But yeah, of art before we went off on that. Throw that out there.
On topic of art, by the way, there is the MS Paint public poll open. I don't know. So
that
ends? I think it's this Sunday. We're currently going through some community discussions on how the polling should go. So since this is the first MS Paint art contest ever, I'm actually really, really happy how it turned out. Obviously, I'm still wishing that the next time we do this, we get hundreds of submissions, because MS Paint should be something anyone can do. But
you say that, but there are some very.
That was one thing that I noticed. I was like, when we were going through this, I was just like, there's not as many as I kind of expected, because it doesn't take that much time to create an MS Paint art. But I guess people were still kind of shy about them. Like, I get it. So we'll see what happens next time. But we're currently kind of polling right now to see if we should do multiple choice. But what I was getting to was, what was I getting to? Oh yeah, Duelyst art. I do want to give a shout out to like some of my favorite artists, like Sympathy, who always creates these wonderful waifu pieces for like the most abstract units. Like the other day, he just created a waifu crystal cloaker, and you just sit there and you're just like, I really wish.
Wait, what?
Oh, you haven't seen it? Let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, there's a waifu crystal cloaker.
I've seen a lot of these. I definitely follow their work on Twitter, but I missed that one somehow, and that seems like
It's because it's hidden away in the MS Paint contest that apparently people didn't get. Okay, here it is. I'm gonna copy this real quick and post it in there. And it's just like I'm envious of all artists and their talents, and just like just check this out. Like this is a crystal cloaker waifu.
Aw.
fantastic.
So I remember when I first got into Duelyst and like the Vanar faction got released, Crystal Cloaker was a unit that I couldn't determine like which side was this front, which side was this
So
back.
you suffered from this MS Paint submission.
Right. I was like, oh, is that the tail?
No, it's a beetle.
That's fantastic. I love that. Oh, hey, look, Riv is here with us now. Hey, Riv, you can technically, I think you can unmute yourself and talk, right?
Yeah, he can. He's just choosing not to.
I guess that's a
peer pressure. Peer. And we don't have to make.
Oh, he's here. I don't know.
Any chance of Retruing getting a common range dispel card? I mean, they've got Blood of Air, man. What more could you want, right? So,
what more could you want? Don't know if that's exactly the question.
I mean, okay, clearly you want more.
If you two mana or less. Back. Yeah, 2 mana or less. So if you have
there we go. I'm in here.
If you have a Dragon Lark and you give your general all the keywords that your minions have, you can fly over to them and then dispel with a common, which I think is similar to the question, right? It's not unlike the question. It's like a three card combo that lets you dispel a minion at range. I guess it doesn't cost 2 or less, but
oh dear.
You just Neuralink a Dragon Lark and then you can siphon energy. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. Except, of course, it's Silver Mist, so Silver Mist is talking about Gauntlet. So my solution is terrible. It's the worst solution ever.
Well, no, if it's Gauntlet, you just substitute the siphon energy for Shroud, and then it all works out.
Of course. How could I be so stupid? The Dragonlark Neuralink is
Shroud.
Perfectly reasonable, but the Shroud...
Pretty easy range dispel solution for every faction.
Oh, man.
You missed the dev talk, Riv.
Yeah, sorry. I was busy with stuff.
Oh, man. That's reasonable. There will be an uploaded... audio, a video where nothing happens.
I think we're
only sounds.
We're gonna throw this up on YouTube. So.
I'm looking forward to the video portion.
Yeah.
You owe that to me now, Umbrella.
I owe you the video portion.
Yeah, you promised it to me. I need to see a video attached to this now.
We can just have it scroll through the chat dynamically.
That should be really cool.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too bad. Is there going to be a new format as opposed to what?
I feel like No Way It's Jay wants there to be a video. That's the feedback I'm getting from chat, from just this whole time.
Having it on Twitch, I guess, is the more accessible way to consume the content, but it's also we stream while we talk, since it's pretty much entirely going to be audio, right?
Yeah, I think the feedback we had and sort of why we chose this format is people really cared a lot about the audio and not so much about what else we were doing. I mean, even some of the ones we had where we were playing games, it was kind of fun, but also clearly playing games distracted us and people were like, I just want to hear whatever. So,
or my favorite thing, the devs are playing horribly. Look at that misplay. Who plays Battle Pets?
Okay, that was my favorite in that. So the very first dev talk, which was the design dev talk, I was playing against Joseki on stream, and man, I'm not a streamer. I've never done it before. I've never played on stream, and so in my head it was like, yeah, it'll be a little bit harder, but it'll be fine. So I deliberately built really difficult decks. Like I was playing like a Sphinx Magmar deck, that required you to like very carefully plan your turns and plan around this riddle. And we got on stream, and the exact second I put a riddle in his hand, I just saw like the game fall apart. It was just like, it's like he's trying to answer. He's doing a great job of answering questions in chat, but then he's like trying to replace, and he's like, I don't know what's happening, and he's like trying to play things, and yeah, it's a lot harder.
Yeah, I huge shout out to streamers. Like,
we love watching you. We can't do what you do. You can't see it, but if I was streaming, you could see me bow, but I can't even stream, so you just have to take my word for it.
That takes a lot of power to multitask a stream, watch the comments, making sure everything on your production side right. Like I went on streaming with Riverwrath to do the community update at one point, and all we're doing is talking and playing the game, and it was just like, I'm trying to do a Valknu meme, and I managed to beat him that first time, but then like every game afterwards, I was so concerned about like trying to answer people's questions that I looked at the board and I'm like, oh, my time's about to run up. I need to pull out something, and I ran out of time. Well,
so that's why you lost. Yeah. You were just too distracted. Okay.
I mean, and
playing Valknu memes.
Well, no, the Valknu memes I did like one time. No, the other thing is, if you guys don't know this, especially people who have not reached S rank and feared Riverwrath on the ladder, Riverwrath has this like uncanny ability to top deck whatever he needs. I'm pretty sure
it's really annoying in testing. It is very hard to figure out the right.
It doesn't feel fair to play against him sometimes, because you're just like, well, if he doesn't draw exactly what he's going to draw, then
he has dev hacks. That's exactly it. It's very.
Always never didn't have it.
I'm very offended that he has dev hacks as a dev. It just feels like extra unfair to me.
Fair,
like if it's gonna be unfair, can we all have dev hacks, or like what?
Because I would love to get rid of like my Thanatos hands, right? Because like I don't know if I've said this multiple times. Like my decks I've tried not to make them top heavy ever, or even slightly, because I'm plagued by I start my opening hand. It's like, here's every single unplayable spell and high mana cost card in your opening hand. You'll mulligan to 2 more, and when you replace, you might find a 3-drop as player 1. And you're like, so I'm going to skip turn 1, as always. And that's just not fair going against someone like Riverwrath, who's just like, I'm going to draw exactly what I need. And you're just like, well, okay, well, this test wasn't very sufficient, you know?
Anytime I win is a sufficient testing experience.
Let me put it like this. I remember going, and I did this because I was completely distraught with my luck. This was back when Third Wish had Blast, and like the best thing to do was play Blast turn 2. I could not draw a 2-drop, and I made a deck with like, I think it was the 14 or 18 2-drops, and I missed turn 1.
Yeah,
and
that sounds like your luck.
I went to Grinch while he was doing Deck Doctor, and he's like, I need help with this deck. He's like, what do you mean you need help? He's like, why do you have like 18 2-drops? I'm like, I can't. I missed turn 1. You know what happens when you miss turn 1 versus a Vitruvian Mirror? You lose. He's just like, no, this is horrible. You put like 9 or maybe 11 in there. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I missed turn 1. It happens all the time. So anyways, we're talking about why Riverwrath has dev hacks and how he draws whatever he needs. And this is why you can't play against them.
Yeah.
I'm just upset it's attributed to dev hacks. I've drawn this way since before I was born.
I was born with this good luck. So that's why I just try to not talk to Riverwrath as often as possible, just avoid him like the plague. I'm actually it's a little awkward that he's in here right now.
Yeah, it's very skewed feedback. So how was that one game? Riverwrath was like, it went perfect. You're like, of course it went for you. All right, let's get some non-Gosu player in here real quick.
Oh man.
All right, guys, I am going to peace out. I am going to continue working on new cards, so I will talk to you guys later.
Thank
you. New cards! All right, yeah.
What a nerd.
Take care. Have a good night, Kronikle.
Take care.
Right, see you guys.
Oh, he's working on a good one too. I mean, that's all I can say, but.
Well, I mean, you'd say that for any single thing, wouldn't you, Kappa?
No.
And Umbrella confirmed shell.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing to anything.
That's not true at all. If he was working on many cards, I would have said nothing. But he's working on a cool card, so I'm selling everyone. Send him your energy so that it may be as cool as possible.
I think the worst part is like none of chat can confirm what card it is, so we can't be like, oh, was it that cool card or was it that one cool card? You'll never know.
When the expansion comes out, look for the one cool card. You'll know. It's like, what? That's not helpful. I don't think I've ever had rep as the helpful dev. I don't think that's ever been my stance.
Whenever it's raining, you're the helpful dev.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. That makes me happy. But yes, other than that, I mean, I remember even way back in the day where we hit a critical mass. I think this was in beta, where I would show up and people would just like stop asking me for spoilers. So like, he's not going to tell us anything. He's just going to make fun of us. He's just going to turn it all into memes and turn it on us. So just like, don't ask. I showed up and I'm like, does anyone want spoilers? People are like, no, please shut up. It's like, I've done my job. Everyone knows where I stand.
Oh dear. I think that was one of my hardest things starting with this job was I was given like basically unlimited power for our first expansion. Like, so however you want to roll this out, you can. I'm just like, and then I immediately like ruined it for myself. I'm like, but I can't do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I did at one point. So like, what was it? Was it the Immortal Vanguard? Like night of
Immortal Vanguard.
Yeah, it was like the night before we did the full card release. I was given the opportunity to like throw out spoilers and like tease people, and I did that. I think also for what was it? Was it Ribreth? You remember this? I think
it was the most recent set, right?
No. It was Pizza Cutter. It was the Horror Burster where I sat down with Discord and I gave him this completely like moshed up card, and they had to go like fix it to figure out what the card was.
That's mean, man. We spent a lot of time making those cards, and then you just.
And I spent a lot of time distorting the cards so that they had a little fun game. What is this? One more day till we find out. Yeah, I mean, that's a legacy I think we're never going to get away from is the Sultan of Spoilers and the Duke of Discoverable. And I think we own it very well. Where yes, there will always be things for you guys to discover, and there will also always be teasers and spoilers. So deal with it, I guess. Get good.
To say it's not even that. It's like we love spoiling stuff, but you know we have to do it responsibly. If we just like told everyone what we're working on while we're doing it, it just wouldn't matter.
Yeah, no, like spoiler season is like my favorite season. It's like after a set's done, you get to like look at everything, get everyone's reactions, both positive, negative. That stuff's awesome. I'm really excited for like the next spoiler season.
I'm always excited for spoiler season.
Yeah,
can't ever get enough.
So much to set up.
I need to remind me to help you write some more tweets this time around because I have a lot of fun doing that.
I definitely want to get you guys a little more involved in those because I'm like I enjoy doing those too, but boy, there's sometimes where I'm just like I am burnt out. What am I doing?
Preferably all the silly ones or the like super dramatic ones. I have no middle ground. If you need any like reasonable ones, I'm completely useless.
I don't think anyone wants to see a reasonable one because that's just like like give me the dank memes or give me the super try hard metacritical.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just popping in, so I'm going to be heading out, guys.
Yep.
Have a great night, everyone.
I'm headed out as well.
Yeah, it's about that time. Thanks for the after hours.
It's 40 minutes past that time, but anyone who stayed...
We've almost doubled our stay, so thanks for everyone for hanging out.
Anyone who stayed, thank you, and also why.
Yeah. They're still talking. They can still spoil more. I mean, they did get an art spoiler from us.
They actually got a bunch of extra stuff from us, so
yeah,
maybe we're the fools. In fact, we are 100%. 100%.
Take care, everyone, and see you later.
Later.
Bye, everyone.